What we'll do now is we're going to move to the group that's reflecting on social housing and the social housing community. We have three speakers, and the first of those will be Tom Hartland, who's the Senior Service Designer at Bromford. Tom?
Yep, thank you, Eric, and thanks for the invite today. If we can go to the slides, please, Anna. So my name is Tom Hartland. I've been with Bromford for 6 years now, and I joined at the very start of the Bromford Lab, which some of you may be aware of. So the Bromford Lab is the in-house innovation and design faculty within Bromford, and it sits under the strategic directorate. So while I'm not a profound expert in energy and decarbonisation, I'll hold my hands up now. You know, our position in the business has given us oversight of a lot of projects and a lot of sort of connection to where we want to go in the future. So that's me. I'll talk a little bit about Bromford on the next slide. Thank you, Anna. So change is pretty much the standard for Bromford, and if I flash back and give you a retrospective back to 2018, we've just come out with a new strategy that had 19 new strategic goals, 25 new project work streams across a range of different exercises. We merged with 2 other housing associations, so it took our mainly Midland-centric business down into the southwest and expanded far more than we thought. So it's 45,000 homes we're currently working with. And in that strategy, despite sustainability being peppered throughout and referred to in a number of those project work streams, there was no real single point of coordination in there. So this is back in 2018. As well, we had an ongoing transformation program, so it was definitely a hive of activity. Next slide, please, Anna. Regardless, we have been sort of chipping at the block of new energy systems. So this is an example of the projects we've been working with. We've also been working with Energy Systems Catapult on their Living Lab project, so contributing some social housing customers towards that pool to sort of broaden the learning about fuel poor households. But ground source heat pumps, air source heat pumps, biomass heating, solar panels, battery storage, you know, we've dipped our toe in the water of all of these. But what was the main driving factor? It was money. So it was the renewable heating incentive. Part of the sort of decarbonisation fund that we're really keen to sort of pursue is how to get these to scale. Because while we're moving along from chunk of funding to chunk of funding, we haven't actually got any of these into a sort of wider dispersed approach yet. Next slide, please, Anna. But all that is changing the wind. So if we look at where we are now, there are 2 big main factors that have sort of refreshed our take and our approach towards sustainability, climate change and carbon emissions within our business. Next slide, please, Anna. And the first of those things is the requirement to provide a 30-year business plan. And the most astute amongst you might realise that it's 2020, and that means tiptoeing into the frame is the net zero target. It's a bit of a double-edged sword, the 30-year business plan, in that it could promote some form of stalling. You know, if you think about where technology will be in 30 years, you know, there's a huge amount of progression there. So you might be, you know, almost incentivized to wait. However, the emergence of that target has said, wait as we might, we need to have something in the chamber ready to sort of plan how we're going to address the net zero in our stock. Next slide, please, Anna. And the second part was a resounding cry from our colleagues around what is our approach. So it might have been noticed that there was no central coordination of sustainability in so many terms within our strategy. And, you know, we probably owe a lot of this to the people tying themselves to bridges and taking their tops off, you know, Extinction Rebellion, Go Power. But it definitely struck a chord with our colleagues, and we had a lot of pressure put on, and it was the most upvoted question in the business briefing after the merger. So next slide, please, Anna. So what did we do first? We wanted to start from a position of being informed. So we took a carbon baseline exercise with SUS Housing, and that was really looking at where in our operations is generating the most carbon dioxide and where we should target. So, I mean, it's a pretty clear picture that if we were going to make the most meaningful impact on carbon emissions as a business, we need to target that within our stock, and that is primarily through making them more energy efficient. Next slide, please. So after that baseline, we hosted a number of workshops with senior leaders, heads of and directors in the business, and these are the real emerging questions and statements. You can see that while there is the 2050 target, there's still a little bit of reticence about what is it we should be doing, where should we start. You know, it's a huge mountain to climb, and the first step is uncertain still now. So what is the certainty about the future legislation, costs, penalties? What's the availability of funding? Predominantly, you know, are we willing to sacrifice profit margin? We're not for profit, but that money that we make off new builds, that can be reinvested in creating more properties for the affordable rental market, and we don't want to compromise on our build targets. Another emerging theme was, you know, how can we improve the use of customer understanding, the use of the heating systems they've got. This again could be a bit of a call for inaction, because we spend all our time trying to train people on the existing suite of technologies rather than stepping into the new technologies. But by and large, everyone is happy to move forwards. We just need to do it cautiously. So next slide, please, Anna. So here are some principles that sort of emerged out of those workshops. So we only want positive outcomes for customers. We do not want to detrimentally impact their fuel affordability. We don't want to improve the fuel affordability of their home only to land them with some added costs afterwards. So that's a pretty bold statement we've got there. Whole system, you know, we want to look at everything, including disposal, exploring how we reduce the emissions of our stock. And again, this might be a bit of an unintended consequence when targeting social housing providers to improve the overall stock, is that in some cases it just will not be cost effective to do so, and disposal might be the only option. But where does that put the problem? You know, is that moving the problem to the private sector, whoever buys it? Are we best placed to deal with that? Or are we just offsetting some of the worst properties? What could we do in that space is a question I'm sort of posing today. No regrets. So we won't do everything solely on the environmental agenda. We'll also try and have some gains for customers within the projects that we're going to try and launch, so that if, you know, there is a policy change or something goes differently, we can still say we've added benefit and made value to our customers. Low regret just refers to our test and pilot methodology that we've been working on with the innovation and design team within Bromford. So that is to say, we'll do progressive, scalable deployments of new technologies, gaining evidence and you know, increasing the deployment as we go on. And collaboration, you know, this is about acknowledging our limitations as a business. You know, we've got a huge operating area, huge operating responsibilities. We haven't got the depth of insight to have all of the understanding about what the best technology and the best moves in this space are. So what we want to do is build bridges now and have a really good suite of projects to go forwards with. Next slide, please. I'm conscious of time, so I'm just going to bulldoze through these. So these are the main priority areas that we've elevated, or we're proposing for the executives. So fabric first. If you look at some of those earlier projects I referred to on the slides, they were a little bit piecemeal. As Matt was talking about, that's what we want to avoid. Can we look at fabric first? What is SAP 96? Can we get there? Partnerships and investments I've already talked about. Workspaces, what are the impacts of our offices, albeit, you know, when we've got no one going in and we're all doing conferences sat in our spare bedrooms, we start to draw a question mark around that. But what sort of energy innovations can we include there? And dynamic modeling, how do we become more data driven? Next slide, please, Anna. And finally, so what do we need? Essentially, we need more central coordination and leadership and collaboration. And, you know, the problems that we'll face around working together on this are just the problems of collaboration in the housing sector overall. But if we can do that, if we can reach out to local authorities, if we can get a more, you know, coordinated suite of goals and objectives of what we want to achieve, and therefore have one roadmap that we're all working towards, then I think, you know, it's a bright future.